I am Harrison. I am 32 years old. For the last 5 years, I funded every luxury vacation, every expensive dinner, and every random financial whim my family had, only to discover they were mocking me behind my back as their personal ATM. While I was working grueling 80-hour weeks and sacrificing my own life, my own youth, and my own mental health to keep them comfortable, my own parents looked at a message calling me a cash cow and laughed. They let it slide as if my only purpose on this earth was to fund their lavish lifestyle. But there is one thing they did not know, one massive, catastrophic detail they completely overlooked in their arrogance. The beautiful, sprawling suburban house they live in, the luxury cars they drive around town to show off to their friends, all the real estate they brag about at their neighborhood HOA meetings, it legally belongs to me, every single brick of it. And right now, they are begging me on their hands and knees not to kick them out into the street. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I brought their entire house of cards crashing down, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to where this absolute nightmare really started. It was a Tuesday evening when the illusion of my perfect, loving family finally shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces. I remember the exact temperature of the room. I was sitting alone in my dimly lit downtown apartment, the kind of sterile, quiet, ridiculously overpriced place you only use for sleeping and showering when your career demands everything else from you. The city lights of Chicago were blinking outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, but I was entirely focused on the harsh white glare of my phone screen. I stared at the family group chat, my eyes burning from fatigue, reading the same text message over and over again until the words lost all meaning. It was from my mother, Sylvia. She was asking for an extra $5,000 to upgrade their upcoming family vacation in the Bahamas from a standard resort suite to a private beachfront villa. She did not ask if I had the money. She did not ask if I was doing okay, or if I had plans for my own time off. She framed the request as an absolute medical and emotional necessity, claiming her joints needed the direct ocean breeze and that my father, Richard, had been incredibly stressed lately and needed the extra square footage to relax. She ended the message with a casual, almost sickeningly sweet reminder that I had just received my annual salary bonus, so transferring the funds should not be a problem for me. I did not reply immediately. The exhaustion in my bones was too heavy. Instead, I scrolled up. I scrolled past months and months of similar, relentless requests. Money for a new water heater because the old one was making a funny noise. Money for my older brother Julian's unexpected car repairs. Again. Money for extravagant Thanksgiving dinners that they insisted on hosting to impress our extended relatives. Dinners that I was barely allowed to enjoy because I was always shoved into a corner, busy answering emergency work emails just to keep the paychecks rolling in. I had always said yes. Every single time. I had always opened my banking app and transferred the funds without a second thought. I genuinely believed that providing for my family was the ultimate sign of a successful man. I believed that by writing those checks, by being the reliable one, I was finally earning the respect, the validation, and the unconditional affection that had always been reserved exclusively for Julian, the undisputed golden child of our family. But then my thumb stopped moving. It hovered over a message sent a few days prior. It was not in the main group chat. It was a screenshot of a side conversation, sent to me privately by my younger cousin, Felix. Felix was a good kid, a college student who always seemed uncomfortable with how the family treated me. He had sent the screenshot out of sheer guilt, adding a small note that said, "I thought you should know how they talk when you are not around. I'm sorry, Harrison." The message in the screenshot was from my Uncle Bernard. Bernard was a man who had contributed absolutely nothing to society. A man who had squandered his own inheritance years ago and now spent his days offering unsolicited financial advice to anyone who would listen. He was a professional parasite. In this side chat, which included my parents, Julian, and a few other relatives, they were discussing the Bahamas trip. Someone had brought up the fact that the villa upgrade was incredibly steep. And there was Bernard's response, immortalized in black and white. "Don't worry about the upgrade costs. Harrison won't mind paying for this one either. He has always been our cash cow. Haha." The words cash cow hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The air left my lungs. My vision actually blurred for a second. But what completely destroyed me, what reached into my chest and ripped my heart out, was not Uncle Bernard's tacky, classless attempt at humor. It was the two little reaction icons right beneath his message. A thumbs up from my father. A laughing face from my mother. My own parents. The people I was literally breaking my back to support. The people I sacrificed my 20s for. They saw me reduced to livestock. They saw me as an open wallet, a walking ATM, a fool to be milked dry, and their immediate reaction was to laugh. They did not defend me. They did not tell Bernard to show some respect for the man funding their entire existence. They agreed with him. They celebrated the insult. I sat there in the absolute silence of my apartment, feeling a cold, hollow sensation spread through my stomach, freezing my blood. The silence was deafening. I realized in that exact, devastating moment that I did not have a family. I never did. I had a board of directors, and I was just the primary investor they were actively, maliciously scamming. Everything I had built with them was a lie. The smiles, the hugs, the "we are so proud of you" son speeches. It was all a performance to keep the direct deposits flowing. I looked back at my mother's current message asking for the $5,000 villa upgrade. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The deeply ingrained habit, the trauma response of typing "sure, Mom, sending it right now," fought violently against the burning, acidic rage building in my throat. I wanted to scream until my vocal cords snapped. I wanted to drive over to their house, kick the front door open, and demand to know why my love was only worth the dollar amount attached to it. But I did not. I took a slow, deep breath, pulling the cold air into my lungs. I locked my phone and set it face down on the glass coffee table. I sat in the dark and let the reality wash over me, completely unfiltered. The anger slowly crystallized into something much more dangerous, much more permanent. Turned into absolute, chilling clarity. I was done being the victim. I was done being the cash cow. But I knew that simply cutting them off required a meticulously calculated plan. I thought the worst was over. I thought realizing they didn't love me was the bottom of the barrel. I was so incredibly wrong. Looking back at our history, I realized the manipulation ran much deeper, and the impending war was going to be brutal. To truly understand how I allowed myself to become the family bank, you have to understand the twisted, toxic dynamic of my childhood. Julian was the star. He was the high school quarterback, the charismatic charmer, the boy with the $1,000,000 smile who never had to work for a single thing in his life. He was the one my parents proudly paraded around town, showing him off to the neighbors like a prized trophy. I, on the other hand, was the quiet kid in the background. I was the one building computers in my bedroom, studying until my eyes bled, trying to carve out a future because I knew nobody was going to hand me one. When Julian flunked out of his first year of college because he spent all his time at frat parties, my parents did not punish him. Instead, they drained their savings and liquidated his college fund to bail him out of his lease, pay off his credit cards, and set him up in a brand new, expensive apartment closer to home so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. When I got accepted into a top-tier engineering program 2 years later, I sat at the kitchen table and asked if they could help me with the initial tuition deposit. My father looked at me over his newspaper, completely unbothered, and told me that I needed to learn the value of a dollar. I took out massive student loans. I worked the graveyard shift at Walmart, stocking shelves at 3 a.m., just to afford my textbooks and instant ramen. They told me it builds character. I believed them. I actually believed they were doing me a favor by letting me struggle. Fast forward a decade, and the tables had completely, dramatically turned. Julian was bouncing from one failed startup to another, constantly relying on my parents for handouts. Meanwhile, I landed a massive, career-defining promotion at a leading software firm. My salary skyrocketed into the top percentile. I received stock options, bonuses, the whole corporate package. For the first time in my entire life, I had real, substantial, undeniable money. And like an absolute fool, desperately seeking the approval he never got as a child, I started spending it on them. It started small, insidious enough that I didn't see the trap closing around my ankle. I took the whole family out for a lavish Thanksgiving dinner at a high-end steakhouse downtown. We are talking dry-aged ribeyes, truffles, the works. When the astronomical bill finally came, I casually reached into my suit jacket and tossed down my corporate platinum card. The look of genuine, unfiltered pride on my mother's face was like a drug injected straight into my veins. My father actually smiled, leaned over, and clapped me on the shoulder. For that one night, for those fleeting 2 hours, I was the hero. I was the son they were proud of. Julian was just the guy sitting across the table, silently seething in envy, staring at his empty wine glass. That single dinner set the precedent. Soon, small favors morphed into towering expectations. A few $100s for groceries here, covering a minor medical bill there. Then came the first Bahamas trip. My mother called me on a Sunday afternoon, her voice thick with fake tears, crying about how the family was drifting apart, how everyone was so stressed, and how a family vacation would fix everything. She said they could not afford it, but she knew I was doing so incredibly well. "You have been so blessed, Harrison," she purred over the phone. "It would mean the world to us. I paid for the flights. I paid for the hotel. I paid for the scuba diving excursions. I told myself it was fine. Family helps family, right? That is what decent people do." But the requests never stopped. They only grew bolder. The most egregious example, the one that should have woken me up, was my father's birthday 3 years ago. His old truck finally broke down, and he spent weeks complaining loudly at every single family gathering about how his back hurt from driving cheap, uncomfortable rentals. He dragged me to a luxury dealership on a Saturday afternoon, claiming he just wanted to look. I remember the smell of the showroom, the pristine polished floors, and the way the salesman in the tailored suit locked eyes on me, knowing instantly exactly who held the power and the purse strings in that dynamic. We stood in front of a brand new, fully loaded Porsche Macan. My father ran his hand over the sleek hood, looking at me with those sad, expectant, calculating eyes. He didn't ask. He just sighed heavily and said, "It sure would be nice to have something reliable for once in my life." I bought it. I sat in that glass office, signed the paperwork, and paid cash. The title and registration remained in my name for insurance purposes, which was a standard financial move, but I handed him the keys right there on the showroom floor. He hugged me, called me a good son, and drove off. Within a month, the gratitude completely evaporated. He stopped thanking me for the car and started actively complaining about the cost of premium gas, fully expecting me to cover his fuel expenses too. He even tried to guilt-trip me when the annual maintenance bill arrived, sliding the invoice across the kitchen table and saying, "Your car needs an oil change, son." Then Julian decided he wanted a piece of the pie. He could not stand the fact that I was the provider. He and his obnoxious, entitled friend Simon started tagging along on the family vacations I was completely funding. They treated the trips like an all-expenses-paid frat party. They would order $1,000 bottles of wine on my tab at dinner. They would book expensive, exclusive golf outings and charge them to my room. Whenever I tried to bring it up, whenever I showed even a hint of frustration, my mother would unleash her classic guilt trips. "Julian is going through a hard time with his divorce, Harrison," she would whisper, her hand on my arm. "He does not have your luck. He does not have your brain. You need to share your blessings. Do not be greedy. Money changes people. Don't let it change you." I swallowed my frustration, shoved down the resentment, and kept paying. I kept signing the receipts. The absolute breaking point arrived at the worst possible time. I had just returned from a grueling, soul-crushing 2-week business trip in Europe. I had barely slept, running on hotel coffee and adrenaline, but I had successfully secured a massive contract for my company. My boss, Gregory, a tough, no-nonsense CEO who rarely gave compliments, actually pulled me into his office. He looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and told me I was the most valuable asset the company had. He respected me. He valued my boundaries, my intellect, and my hard work. It was the starkest, most painful contrast to how I was treated at home. I walked into my apartment that evening, completely drained, dragging my suitcase across the hardwood floor. I did not even turn on the lights. I just wanted to fall into bed and sleep for a week. That is when my phone buzzed. That is when I opened the message from Felix. The screenshot. Cash cow. The thumbs up from the man I bought a Porsche for. The laughing face from the woman whose beachfront villa I was supposed to fund. Seeing that message while still wearing the wrinkled suit from a job that was quite literally paying for their entire existence broke something fundamental inside me. It snapped the last remaining thread of my desperate need for their approval. The years of financial abuse, the emotional manipulation, the complete lack of basic human decency flashed before my eyes like a movie reel. I was not a son to them. I was a 401k plan they could withdraw from without penalty. I was the safety net they gleefully, maliciously trampled on. I realized that my entire relationship with my parents was a cold, calculated transaction, and the currency was my self-respect. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the sheer exhaustion seep out of my bones, replaced by a cold, calculating, terrifying anger. I thought setting boundaries would be a simple conversation, a rough patch we could talk through. I was so incredibly wrong. The real war, the ugly, vindictive battle for my freedom, was just beginning. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across my apartment. I had not slept a single minute. I stood at my kitchen island, drinking my coffee black, feeling a strange, hollow calm settling over me. My hands were perfectly steady. The family group chat was still active on my phone screen. My mother had followed up on her request for the $5,000 early that morning, clearly impatient. She added a few high-resolution pictures of the luxury beachfront villa to entice me. "Just imagine the sunsets, Harrison," she wrote, adding a little heart emoji. "We really need this family bonding time. Let me know when the transfer goes through so Julian can finalize the booking." I set my coffee mug down. I opened the group chat, tapped the text box, and typed the most terrifying, liberating sentence of my life. "I think it is time you all handle it on your own this year. I have been covering everything for the last few years, and it is time you all pitch in. I am not paying for this trip, I am not paying for the villa, and I cannot keep doing this. Figure it out." I hit send. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening perfection. For 2 agonizing, glorious hours, my phone sat on the marble counter, completely lifeless. No one typed, no one called. There were no red receipts, but I knew they had seen it. It was the digital equivalent of a nuclear bomb dropping in the middle of their living room. I could practically see them sitting on the expensive leather sofa I bought them, staring at their screens in absolute shock, trying to process the horrifying fact that the ATM had just permanently swallowed their card. Then, exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes later, the storm hit. My phone erupted. It vibrated violently against the counter. Call after call, text after text, a barrage of panic and rage. I ignored the first 5 calls, letting them go straight to voicemail, listening to the automated voice calmly record their rising hysteria. Finally, I picked up the phone and answered a call from my mother. The moment the line connected, the performance began. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not ask why I made that decision or if I was struggling financially. She immediately launched into her heavily rehearsed routine of tears and manipulation. "Harrison, what is wrong with you?" Her voice trembled, thick with artificial grief and barely concealed panic. "How can you do this to us? We already told everyone in the neighborhood we were going to the beachfront villa. Do you want to humiliate us? Is that what this is? Are you trying to punish your own family?" I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. "Mom, I am not trying to humiliate anyone. I am simply saying I am not paying for it. I am exhausted. You have all taken my money, my time, and my sanity for granted." "Taken for granted?" she shrieked, instantly dropping the sad, wounded bird act for pure, venomous rage. "I carried you for 9 months. I went through 30 hours of labor for you. Your father worked his fingers to the bone to keep a roof over your head when you were a boy. Family helps family, Harrison. We have always supported you, and the second you get a little bit of money, the second you think you are better than us, you turn your back on your own blood. You are being horribly, disgustingly selfish." I closed my eyes. The sheer audacity of her words made my head spin. Supported me? They raided my savings to pay for Julian's mistakes. They told me to get a minimum wage job at Walmart while Julian got a brand new car for his high school graduation. "I did not ask to be born, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm whisper. "And I certainly did not ask to be your retirement fund. My answer is no. Figure it out yourselves. Sell the cars if you want to go to the beach so badly." I hung up. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the massive rush of adrenaline that comes from finally fighting back after a lifetime of submission. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Julian's name. I knew this was going to be incredibly ugly, so I calmly hit the record button on my secondary device before answering the call. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Julian barked the second I answered, his voice laced with his trademark arrogance and entitlement. "You made Mom cry, you arrogant little prick. You think because you have a fancy tech job and wear expensive suits you can just disrespect this family?" "I am not disrespecting anyone, Julian," I replied evenly, refusing to rise to his bait. "I am just closing my wallet. If the trip is so incredibly important to you and Simon, you pay for it. You are 35 years old. Use your own credit card." Julian let out a bitter, mocking laugh. "You know damn well I cannot afford that villa. Come on, Harrison, stop being a dramatic diva and just transfer the money. You make that much in a week. Don't be a cheapskate. You are ruining everyone's summer." "No," I said firmly, the word feeling like a brick wall I was finally building. "Listen to me, you little tech nerd," Julian snarled, his temper flaring, his mask slipping. "You need to send that money right now. I already promised Simon we were going, and I have obligations." Something in his tone caught my attention. It was subtle, but after years of dealing with corporate negotiations, I recognized it instantly. A slight hesitation, a crack in his confident, bullying armor. "Obligations?" I pressed, narrowing my eyes, leaning closer to the phone. "What kind of obligations, Julian? What does that even mean?" "None of your business," he snapped, but he was talking too fast now, his breathing shallow. "Just send the $5,000 for the villa, plus the usual $3,000 for the resort fees and hotel rooms. I am the one who always books them, remember? Just send it to my account like always. Let me handle the logistics." My mind raced. For the past 3 years, Julian had magnanimously volunteered to handle the hotel bookings and resort fees to save me the hassle. I always transferred the exact amount he requested into his personal checking account, assuming he was paying the resort directly. I walked over to my laptop, opened my bank statements, and quickly pulled up the official website of the resort they stayed at last year in the Bahamas. I checked their official rates for the exact dates and room types we had used. The realization hit me like a runaway freight train. I did the math in my head, staring at the screen. The rates Julian had been quoting me, the amounts I had faithfully transferred to him year after year, were exactly double the actual cost of the rooms. "You've been skimming," I said out loud, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "You have been overcharging me for the hotels and pocketing the difference. How long, Julian? How long have you been stealing from your own brother?" "I am not stealing," he yelled, sheer panic creeping into his voice, realizing he had just exposed himself. "I organize the trips. I do the legwork. Consider it an administrative fee. You have so much money you don't even notice a few grand here and there. Look, Harrison, I owe some people, okay? Bad people. If I don't get that money to them by the end of the month, they are going to take me to court. They might even go after my custody arrangement with my ex-wife. She will take the kids, Harrison. You have to help me. You can't let them ruin my life." He was using my money. He was using the family vacations I funded as a money laundering scheme to pay off his illicit gambling debts, all while playing the devoted, caring family man in front of our parents. The level of betrayal, the sheer, calculated deceit, was staggering. took my breath away. "You are on your own, Julian," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "Do not ever ask me for a dime again. And if you try to contact me, I will send these bank statements directly to your ex-wife's lawyer." I ended the call and instantly blocked his number. I stood in my kitchen, breathing heavily, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. The people who were supposed to love me most had orchestrated a massive, multi-year scam to drain my accounts, and they felt entirely justified in doing so because I was just a cash cow. I thought discovering their theft would bring me a sense of peace, a clear conscience to walk away. I was dead wrong. The real war was just beginning, and they were about to summon the heavy artillery. The fallout from my absolute refusal was swift, brutal, and highly coordinated. My father, Richard, who usually preferred to sit back and let my mother handle the emotional dirty work and guilt trips, finally stepped into the ring. He did not call. He sent me a single, ominous text message that appeared on my screen like a strict military order. "My house. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. sharp. You will show up, and you will fix this disrespect, or you are no longer my son." It was a classic Richard move. Command, demand, and threaten to sever ties. In the past, a message like that would have sent me into a blind panic spiral. I would have spent the entire night pacing the floor, desperately trying to figure out how to grovel, how to apologize, and how to make amends so I wouldn't lose my father's approval. But this time I read the message, set my phone down, and felt absolutely nothing but a cold, hard, impenetrable resolve. They had played their final card, and it was blank. The next morning, I went to work. The corporate environment, usually a source of immense stress, felt like a sanctuary of logic and reason compared to my family. I walked straight past my desk and stepped into the corner office of my closest friend and colleague, Clara. Clara was a senior project manager, a brilliant, fiercely independent woman who took zero nonsense from anyone. She had been my sounding board for years, listening to my family drama with increasing concern. She sat across her massive desk, sipping her black coffee as I laid out the entire situation. The cash cow texts, Julian's massive skimming operation, the gambling debts, and my father's demand to appear at the family home for a disciplinary hearing. Clara set her mug down slowly. She looked at me dead in the eye, her expression entirely serious. "Harrison, listen to me very carefully. You are walking into an ambush tonight. They are going to gang up on you. They will play the victim, they will cry, they will scream, and they will try to break you down mentally until you open your checkbook out of sheer exhaustion. You cannot treat this like a family dinner. You need to treat this like a hostile corporate takeover." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair, feeling the exhaustion behind my eyes. "But I have to face them, Clara. I cannot just ghost them. I need to look them in the eye and say no. I need them to know, unequivocally, that the dynamic has permanently changed." "Fine," Clara said, leaning forward, sliding a legal pad across her desk. "But you do not go in unarmed. You take your bank statements. You take the printed screenshots. And most importantly, you remember exactly who holds the leverage here. They are terrified, Harrison. They are absolutely terrified of losing their cash cow. Use that fear. Do not let them dictate the terms of your surrender, because you are not surrendering." That evening, the drive to the suburbs felt like driving to my own execution. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with perfectly manicured lawns, towering oak trees, and large, expensive homes. I pulled into the wide, paved driveway of the house my parents lived in. The house I had secured for them when they were facing bankruptcy 5 years ago. I sat in my car for a full minute, the engine idling, gripping the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The Porsche Macan I had bought for my father was parked right next to me, freshly washed, gleaming aggressively under the streetlights. It was a massive, metal monument to my foolish desperation for love and acceptance. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked up the cobblestone path. I did not knock. I pushed the heavy oak front door open and stepped into the foyer. My parents were sitting at the formal dining room table, a sprawling mahogany piece usually reserved for Thanksgiving holidays or serious family meetings. The lighting was low and dramatic. My mother had her arms tightly crossed over her chest, her eyes red and puffy as if she had been crying for hours, though I suspected she had just rubbed them before I walked in. My father sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, his face an alarming, dangerous shade of red. Julian was noticeably absent. The coward was likely hiding in his apartment, too terrified to face me after I exposed his grand theft. "Sit down," my father commanded, pointing a heavy finger to the empty chair at the opposite end of the long table. I did not sit. I stood behind the chair, resting my hands firmly on the high wooden back. "I prefer to stand. Say what you need to say, Dad. I don't have much time tonight." My father slammed his fist on the table. The crystal glasses and heavy silverware rattled violently against the wood. "Do not take that tone with me in my own house. We raised you to be a decent, respectful, God-fearing man. What happened to the Harrison who cared about this family? You have turned into a selfish, arrogant brat who cares more about his bank account than his own mother's happiness. You are tearing us apart over a few $1,000s. Your mother has been crying all night," he continued, his voice rising in volume, echoing off the high ceilings. "You are going to take out your phone, you are going to transfer the money for the villa right now, and you are going to apologize to her. We have always helped you when you needed it, Harrison, and now it is your turn to do your duty." I looked at my mother. She dabbed her eyes delicately with a tissue, nodding in silent agreement, fully committing to the role of the wounded, heartbroken matriarch. "My duty?" I asked, keeping my voice low, dangerous, and perfectly controlled. "My duty was to be a son. Your duty was to be parents. Instead, you treated me like an investment property. You took my money to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford. You happily funded Julian's gambling debts while he stole from me, and you sat in a group chat laughing while Uncle Bernard called me a cash cow." My parents froze. The absolute silence in the room was deafening. The color instantly drained from my mother's face, leaving her looking pale and terrified. They had absolutely no idea I knew about the private text thread. You hacked my phone?" my mother stammered, abandoning her fake tears instantly, her voice high and panicked. "No, Mom. Felix sent it to me. He felt disgusted by you, just like I am." My father stood up abruptly, his heavy chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. He pointed a trembling, furious finger directly at my face. "How dare you speak to us like that? We are your parents. You owe us everything you have. If you walk out that door tonight without fixing this, don't you ever bother coming back. You will be dead to this family. Do you understand me? Dead." He thought the ultimate threat of disownment would break me. He thought the primal fear of losing my family, of being cast out, would force me to fall to my knees and surrender my checkbook. He had played that exact card my entire life to keep me in line, and it had always worked. But not tonight. I looked at the man who had happily traded his son's love for a luxury German vehicle. I looked at the woman who consistently manipulated my emotions to fund a lavish, beachside lifestyle she did not earn. I felt a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders, evaporating into the air. "I don't owe anyone anything," I said, my voice echoing clearly in the silent dining room. "I helped because I wanted to be loved, but I will never, ever be taken for granted again." I turned my back on them and calmly walked toward the front door. "Harrison!" my father roared behind me, a sound of pure desperation and rage. "You walk out that door and we are done. Do you hear me? We are done." I opened the door, stepped out into the cool, crisp evening air, and closed it firmly behind me. I walked to my car, got in, started the engine, and drove away without looking back in the rearview mirror even once. I had survived the ultimate confrontation. I had held my ground against the people who installed my buttons. But as I merged onto the highway back to the city, my phone began to light up with a continuous stream of notifications. The family smear campaign had officially launched. They were about to try and destroy my reputation, completely unaware of the absolute, earth-shattering devastation I was preparing to unleash upon them. The drive back to my downtown Chicago apartment that night was a complete blur of neon streetlights, blaring horns, and pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I gripped the leather steering wheel of my car so tightly my hands ached, my mind racing through the explosive confrontation I had just survived. I had finally done it. I had walked out on the people who had spent my entire life installing my emotional buttons just so they could push them whenever they needed a payout. But the true nightmare, the calculated psychological warfare, began the exact moment I opened my eyes the next morning. My phone, which I had left on the marble nightstand on silent, looked like a lit-up Christmas tree of aggressive notifications. The family smear campaign had not just launched, it had gone completely nuclear overnight. I sat on the edge of my bed, the morning sun barely peeking through the heavy blackout blinds, and started scrolling through the wreckage. It was a perfectly coordinated, multi-front assault designed to destroy my reputation and force me into submission through sheer public humiliation. My mother, Sylvia, had apparently spent the entire night calling every single aunt, uncle, second cousin, and family friend we had. She did not sleep. She worked the phones like a ruthless political campaign manager facing a scandal. The first text message I opened was from my Aunt Diana, my mother's older sister. Diana was a woman who proudly appointed herself as the moral compass of our extended family. Despite having filed for divorce 3 separate times and constantly borrowing money she never returned. The text was a solid, impenetrable block of self-righteous fury. "Harrison," she wrote, her digital tone dripping with condescension. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She is hyperventilating in her bedroom. I cannot believe you would treat the woman who gave you life with such absolute cruelty over a simple vacation. You have changed so much since you got that promotion. Corporate greed has completely corrupted your soul. You think your salary makes you better than us? You need to drive back to that house, get on your knees, and apologize immediately before you lose the only people in this world who truly love you." I stared at the screen, feeling a hot flash of anger. The sheer hypocrisy of Aunt Diana lecturing me on greed was almost comical. Then came a message from Nathan, my cousin. Nathan was a guy I had actually helped secure a lucrative job interview a few years back when he was facing eviction. "Dude, what the hell is wrong with you?" his message read. "Making Aunt Sylvia cry over a few $1,000? Julian said you are trying to financially blackmail them because you want to control the family. Not cool, man. You make 6 figures. Pay for the damn trip and stop acting like a spoiled brat. You need to fix this right now." Message after message. Voicemail after voicemail. The narrative was flawlessly orchestrated. They painted me as a monster, a greedy, heartless tech bro who was throwing his elderly, loving parents out to the wolves simply because I wanted to hoard my wealth. Julian had clearly spun a brilliant, victim-centered narrative. He completely omitted his embezzlement. He conveniently forgot to mention his illicit gambling debts. He framed my refusal to pay as a sudden, psychotic break from reality. I was the villain. They were the innocent, loving family just trying to spend some quality bonding time together at the beach. I spent the next 3 weeks in absolute, agonizing isolation. I did not reply to Aunt Diana. I did not text Nathan back to defend myself. I ruthlessly blocked numbers as they came in, watching my contact list shrink day by day. But the silence in my apartment was deafening. There is a specific, hollow, terrifying kind of grief that comes with realizing your entire extended family will actively turn on you without ever bothering to ask for your side of the story. They did not want the truth. They wanted the status quo. Clara, my colleague and the only person keeping me anchored to reality, dragged me out for coffee every single morning before we went into the office. She forced me to look at the cold, hard facts, constantly reminding me that engaging with their flying monkeys would only give them the drama and the emotional supply they craved. We were sitting in a small, bustling cafe near our corporate headquarters. I was staring blankly into my black coffee, feeling the weight of the isolation pressing down on my chest. "They are starving you out, Harrison," Clara said sharply, stirring her espresso. She wore a tailored suit and an expression that tolerated absolutely zero nonsense. This is classic siege warfare. They think if they cut off your emotional supply, if they make you feel entirely alone and universally hated, you will come crawling back with your checkbook open just to make the pain stop. Do not engage. Hold the line. It is just hard, Clara. I admitted, my voice rough. These are people I grew up with, people I trusted, and they believe every single lie Julian and my mother feed them. I have half a mind to post my bank statements right now. Not yet, Clara instructed firmly, tapping her manicured finger on the table. You never fire your heavy artillery at the infantry. You wait for the generals to expose themselves. Let them get comfortable in their lies. The higher they build their pedestal of victimhood, the harder they are going to fall when you kick the legs out from under it. And I did. I held the line. I focused on my work, poured my energy into my real estate investments, and ignored the endless barrage of guilt trips. I waited until the second week of the following month, when the suffocating silence from my parents suddenly, inexplicably broke. I was sitting in my corner office, reviewing a massive quarterly expansion report for the firm, when my personal cell phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was my father, Richard. I stared at the flashing name, my heart instantly pounding a heavy, primal rhythm against my ribs. After weeks of venom, screaming, and orchestrating a family-wide boycott against me, why was he calling now? I reached over, hit the record button on my secondary desk phone, took a deep, steadying breath to completely clear my voice of any emotion, and answered the call. "Hello, Dad," I said, my tone perfectly neutral, giving absolutely nothing away. "Harrison," my father replied. I immediately noticed the shift. The tone was entirely different. The blinding rage was completely gone. The booming, authoritative, demanding bark he usually weaponized had been replaced by a soft, almost paternal gentleness that instantly made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was the exact, calculated voice he used when he was sitting across from a client, about to close a highly questionable business deal. "How have you been, son?" he asked, his voice dripping with fabricated concern. "I have been busy," I replied cautiously, refusing to give him an inch of conversational leverage. "What do you want, Dad?" I heard a heavy, manufactured sigh on the other end of the line, the sound of a man pretending to carry the weight of the world. "Listen, son. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of deep soul searching these past few weeks. We realized things got out of hand at the house. We were emotional. You have to understand, Harrison, we just love you so incredibly much. The thought of this family falling apart over a silly misunderstanding about money just broke our hearts." I pinched the bridge of my nose, closing my eyes. The gaslighting was so incredibly thick I could practically choke on it. "You told me I was dead to the family, Dad. You screamed it at my back as I walked out your front door. I was angry, Harrison. Fathers and sons fight." He chuckled. A forced, jovial, completely inappropriate sound given the circumstances. "But we are blood, and blood is thicker than any argument over a vacation. Listen to me. We want to make this right. We want to show you that we value you. We value your hard work. We don't just value your money. We value you as a man." "I am listening," I said, leaning back in my leather chair, waiting for the inevitable hook to drop. "Your mother and I were talking to our lawyer yesterday," he began, and instantly, my ears perked up. My entire body went rigid. The word lawyer was rarely used in my family unless someone was being sued or someone was trying to hide assets. "We know you have been working so hard, and you have built a great corporate life, but we also know the economy is incredibly tough right now, even for guys with your salary. So, we have decided to completely restructure our estate planning." He paused for dramatic effect, clearly expecting me to gasp in shock and overwhelming gratitude. I remained dead silent, letting the quiet stretch over the phone line. "We are going to give you your inheritance early, Harrison," my father announced, his voice swelling with magnificent, benevolent generosity. "We are going to legally sign over 20% of the house's equity to you right now. We will put it in writing. It is a massive chunk of real estate value. We want you to have that long-term financial security. We want to prove to you that we see you as an equal partner in this family, not just a kid anymore. I stared blankly at the glass wall of my office. An inheritance, an early cut of the estate. The absolute audacity of the lie was breathtaking. There is just one small thing we need to clear up first, my father continued, his tone smoothly shifting back to business mode. Julian has gotten himself into a bit of a bind. A legal issue. Nothing he cannot handle eventually, but he needs a little immediate liquidity to keep things quiet. We need you to cover the Bahamas trip so your mother can relax, and we need you to lend Julian $20,000 to clear up his debts. Think of it as an advance on the rest of the inheritance. We sign over the equity, you help your brother out of a jam, and we all go to the beach as a family. Everyone wins. It was the ultimate trap. It was the masterclass bait of a lifetime. They thought I was so deeply desperate for their validation, so hungry for a piece of the family pie, that I would blindly accept a percentage of their imaginary wealth in exchange for bailing out the golden child and funding their luxury vacation. They thought they had finally found my price. They thought they could buy my obedience with real estate they did not even own. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a man who held a winning lottery ticket while watching a con artist try to sell him a counterfeit penny. An inheritance? I repeated softly, tasting the word, letting him believe I was considering the offer. You want to give me a percentage of the house. Exactly, son. It's a huge step for us, but you deserve it, he said eagerly, sensing a total victory. You just transfer the funds to Julian tonight, and we will draw up the papers next week. No, Dad, I said smoothly. If we are doing this, we do it right. I need to look over the paperwork in person. I will come to the house tomorrow evening. We will finalize everything then, face to face. That is my boy, he said proudly, relief washing over his voice. We will have dinner ready. See you tomorrow, Harrison. I hung up the phone. I didn't just have them cornered now. I had them actively, enthusiastically building their own gallows. They wanted to play a high-stakes game with real estate, legal threats, and inheritance? Fine. I was going to walk into that house and show them exactly who owned the entire board. The next 24 hours were a blur of meticulous, cold-blooded preparation. I did not go to the office. Instead, I spent the morning sitting in the sleek, glass-paneled conference room of my legal counsel, Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a shark of a real estate lawyer, a man who charged by the minute and was worth every single penny. I laid out the entire situation, explaining my father's ridiculous offer of gifting me an early inheritance based on property equity they legally did not possess. Henderson did not laugh, but a sharp, predatory gleam appeared in his eyes. We spent 2 hours pulling the official county-certified documents. We printed the master property deed with the raised government seal. We pulled the official vehicle registration and title history for the Porsche Macan. And finally, I printed the undeniable, color-coded bank statements proving Julian's 3-year embezzlement scheme, placing them side by side with the official resort pricing. I organized everything into a single, unassuming manila folder. I was not walking into a family dinner. I was walking into a corporate execution. That evening, the air was thick with Midwestern humidity as I pulled my car up to the sprawling suburban house. I didn't bring a briefcase to make them suspicious. I didn't bring a laptop. I just carried that single, standard manila folder. I walked up the long paved driveway, casually walking past the gleaming Porsche Macan, and knocked firmly on the front door. My mother opened it almost instantly. Her face was plastered with a massive, beaming, flawless smile. The hysterical tears, the vicious screaming, and the sheer terror from our last encounter had completely vanished, instantly replaced by the confident, glowing aura of a woman who thought she had successfully manipulated her target back into the cage. Harrison, come in, sweetheart. It is so wonderful to see you, she cooed, reaching out with both arms to hug me tightly. I stepped back smoothly, avoiding her grasp entirely, offering a brief nod, and walked past her into the grand foyer. The dining room table was set up like a corporate boardroom. My father sat at the head of the mahogany table, wearing a crisp button-down shirt, looking incredibly pleased with himself. And there, sitting across from him, was Julian. Julian looked highly nervous. His right leg was bouncing rapidly under the table, rattling the silverware, but he managed to force a tight, arrogant smirk onto his face when I walked into the room. They really, truly thought they had won. They thought the cash cow had come home to be milked. "Have a seat, son," my father said, gesturing grandly to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. "Your mother made pot roast." I remained standing. I walked to the edge of the table and tossed the manila folder onto the center of the polished wood. It landed with a soft, authoritative thud that instantly commanded the room's attention. "Before we eat," I began, looking directly into my father's eyes, "let me make sure I absolutely understand the legal terms of this incredible offer. You are going to formally gift me 20% of the equity in this house as an early inheritance. In exchange for this generous gift, I am going to pay for the beachfront villa in the Bahamas, and I am going to write a check to Julian for $20,000 to pay off his illicit gambling debts." Julian flinched violently at the word gambling, shooting a panicked, wide-eyed look at our parents. But my father just waved a dismissive, highly arrogant hand. "Your brother made some bad investments in the market, Harrison. We don't need to use ugly words like gambling in this house. But yes, that is the general deal. We are offering you a substantial piece of the estate to secure your future. It is more than fair, and it puts this ugly business behind us," Richard said, puffing out his chest, leaning back in his chair like a king granting a pardon. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch out in the room until it became thick and suffocatingly uncomfortable. I watched them shift in their seats. Then, I reached out and opened the folder. "There is a massive, catastrophic flaw in your estate planning, Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a dead, icy, terrifying calm. I pulled out the thick stack of legal documents, bound with a blue ribbon, bearing the golden seal of the county clerk's office. I slid it aggressively across the polished wood until it hit my father's hands. "What is this?" he asked, frowning deeply, looking down at the dense legal jargon, clearly confused by the lack of a checkbook. "That," I said, pointing a firm finger at the document, "is the master deed to this property. You might want to put on your reading glasses and read the name on the title. Richard." My father slowly reached into his shirt pocket and put on his reading glasses. He picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the first paragraph, moving left to right, and then they stopped abruptly. They locked onto a single, bolded line of text. I watched the exact moment his reality shattered. The blood drained from his face so incredibly fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His hands began to tremble, making the heavy paper shake. "Richard, what does it say? What is wrong?" my mother asked, her voice trembling slightly with sudden panic as she leaned over his shoulder to look. She scanned the paper, found the line, and let out a sharp, genuine gasp of horror. "It says Harrison," my father whispered, his voice completely hollow, entirely stripped of its booming authority. "Yes, it does," I said, stepping closer to the table, projecting my voice so it commanded every single inch of the room. 5 years ago, when you were facing absolute total bankruptcy because you foolishly co-signed a catastrophic business loan for Julian's failed startup, the bank was going to foreclose on this house. Do you remember that, Dad? Do you remember sitting at this exact table, crying in your hands because you were going to lose everything? My father did not move. He was completely paralyzed. "You begged me to help?" I continued, relentless, refusing to let them look away. "So I did. I stepped in. I paid off the massive arrears with my own savings, and I bought the mortgage from the bank outright. I let you stay here. I let you pretend you still owned it to save your fragile ego in front of your country club friends and the neighborhood HOA. But you do not own this house, Dad. You don't own a single brick of it. I am the sole legal proprietor of this property." I reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. I tossed it directly in front of Julian, who was staring at me with wide, terrified, completely broken eyes. "And that," I said, pointing at the second paper, "is the official title and registration to the Porsche Macan currently sitting in the driveway. The luxury car you drive every day, Dad. The car you use to show off to your friends. The insurance, the registration, the title, it is all entirely in my name. I bought it. I own it." I leaned heavily over the table, bracing my hands on the wood, looking deeply into my father's horrified, defeated eyes. "You cannot give me an inheritance, Richard, because you have absolutely nothing to give. You have no estate. You have no assets. Everything you have, everything you use to pretend you are a successful patriarch, legally belongs to the cash cow." The silence in the dining room was absolute. It was the heavy, crushing silence of an empire collapsing into dust. My mother started to shake, a real, terrifying tremor taking over her entire body as she realized she was entirely at my mercy. Julian looked like he was going to vomit right there on the table. You lied to us," my father finally choked out, his voice a pathetic, broken rasp. "I never lied," I fired back instantly, my voice cracking like a whip in the quiet room. "I legally secured my financial investments because I knew you were terrible with money. And thank God I did, because if I had simply handed you the cash 5 years ago, Julian would have gambled this entire house away by now. Now here is the new deal. The only deal." I stood up straight, calmly adjusting my suit jacket. "Julian, you are going to leave this house right now. If you ever contact me again, if you ever ask for a dime, I will send these bank statements proving your massive embezzlement directly to your ex-wife's custody lawyer. You won't see your kids until they graduate college. Get out." Julian scrambled out of his chair, nearly knocking it over backward, and bolted for the front door without saying a single word. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind him, echoing through the house. "As for you two," I said, turning my cold gaze back to my parents, who were now clinging to each other in sheer, unadulterated terror. "You will surrender the keys to the Porsche by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I am selling it, and starting on the 1st of next month, you will be signing a formal, legally binding lease agreement with Mr. Henderson. You will pay me fair market rent to live in my house. If you miss a single payment, I will serve you with a 30-day eviction notice, and I will have the sheriff physically remove you from the premises." My mother burst into violent, hysterical tears, reaching out for my arm. "Harrison, please, you cannot do this. We are your parents. Where will we go? We don't have that kind of money. We live on a fixed income." "Then I highly suggest you cancel the beachfront villa," I said, my voice completely devoid of any pity or hesitation, "because the cash cow just permanently closed his doors. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. If I honestly thought the private, devastating destruction of my family's massive ego at the dining room table was the end of the war, I severely underestimated their boundless capacity for vindictive delusion. Even after having the absolute legal reality of their situation smashed directly into their faces, my mother, Sylvia, could not resist playing the victim one last, spectacular time. She genuinely believed she could win a war of public opinion against a man who held all the receipts. 2 days after the brutal confrontation at the house, I was sitting quietly in my office, reviewing a contract, when my phone buzzed aggressively. It was an alert from Facebook. My mother had published a massive public post, deliberately tagging over 50 family members, friends, neighbors, and people from their local church. I opened the app, and my jaw tightened so hard my teeth ached. She had posted a picture of herself and my father from a previous vacation, looking incredibly sad, weathered, and heartbroken. The caption she wrote was an absolute masterclass in emotional manipulation and weaponized guilt. "Sometimes you have to learn the hard way that family doesn't always have your back. Richard and I poured our blood, sweat, and tears into raising a son who we thought would love us unconditionally. We sacrificed everything for him. But money changes people. Greed corrupts the soul. Just because you give someone your whole heart doesn't mean you won't be cruelly discarded when they decide you are no longer useful to their corporate lifestyle. We are facing a terrible hardship brought on by our own flesh and blood. Please pray for our family during this incredibly dark and painful time. Be careful who you trust. Within a single hour, the post had dozens of comments. The flying monkeys had arrived. Aunt Diana was there in the comments, calling me a heartless sociopath who belonged in jail. Neighbors from the HOA were offering their deepest condolences, suggesting my parents hire a lawyer to sue me for severe emotional distress. People from their church were offering to bring them casseroles. They were aggressively validating her victimhood, feeding her massive ego, and creating a toxic echo chamber of lies. They were trying to publicly shame me into surrendering the house and the car out of sheer embarrassment. They wanted a public spectacle? Fine. I would give them a nuclear explosion they would never, ever recover from. I did not write a long, emotional, defensive paragraph. I did not try to plead my case or defend my character to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I simply opened my secure digital files and gathered the heavy ammunition. I hit the share button on my mother's post, adding my own brief, surgically precise commentary to the top of it. I wrote, "To everyone who has been wondering what is truly going on with my family lately, and to everyone offering prayers and casseroles in the comments below, please allow me to provide the missing, factual context to this tragic story." Then I attached the photos. Attachment number 1. The unedited screenshot of the side group chat. Uncle Bernard's exact, vile words. "Harrison won't mind paying for this one either. He has always been our cash cow. Haha." Right beneath it, highlighted for clarity, the clear, undeniable thumbs up from my father, and the laughing emoji from the mother who claimed to be so heartbroken. Attachment number 2. A side-by-side financial comparison. On the left, Julian's text demanding exactly $3,000 for the resort hotel rooms. On the right, the official bank statement showing the money going into his personal checking account, paired with a screenshot from the resort's official website showing the actual cost of the rooms was only $1,500. A clear, undeniable, federally prosecutable paper trail of his embezzlement. Attachment number 3. The redacted, but very clear, first page of the property deed, proving unequivocally that I, Harrison, was the sole legal owner of the exact house my parents were currently sitting in while writing their pathetic victim post. I clicked post. I closed my laptop, walked out of my office, and went to get a sandwich at the deli down the street. I didn't look at my phone for 3 solid hours. I let the bomb detonate in complete silence. When I finally returned to my desk and opened Facebook again, the fallout was apocalyptic. The tide had not just turned. It had become a violent, unstoppable tsunami. The comment section under my shared post was a complete war zone of shattered illusions. Aunt Diana, who had called me a sociopath an hour earlier, had completely deleted her comment and was now publicly demanding to know why Sylvia had blatantly lied to her about owning the house. Cousin Nathan commented, "Wait, Julian has been stealing from the family vacation fund to pay off debts? Are you actually kidding me right now?" People who hadn't spoken to me in years were sending me direct messages, completely shocked and deeply disgusted by the evidence. The absolute, undeniable proof of their greed, the sheer cruelty of the cash cow text, and the shocking revelation that they were living completely rent-free in a house I owned while publicly trashing my name, completely shattered their carefully crafted facade of respectability. They couldn't spin official bank statements. They couldn't manipulate a county property deed. Then the frantic, panicked phone calls started. My mother called me 12 times in a row. I let every single one ring out. Finally, I answered the 13th call, putting it on speakerphone and setting it on my desk. "Harrison, take it down. Take it down right now." She was screaming into the receiver, completely hysterical, her voice cracking. "You are ruining us. The neighbors are calling the house. Diana won't speak to me. The church group saw it. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Mom," I said. my voice perfectly steady, completely devoid of empathy. You wanted to bring the public into our private family business to manipulate me. I just provided the public with the accurate documentation. You were helping me, right? No, you were using me. Don't twist the truth to make yourself look like a martyr. The only thing you ever helped me with was enabling me to keep paying for your lives while you completely ignored mine. We will be social outcasts, she sobbed loudly, the crushing reality of her shattered reputation finally sinking in. How can you be so cruel to your own mother? Cruel as laughing at your son while milking him dry, I replied flatly. Have the keys to the Porsche on the kitchen counter by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, or I report the vehicle stolen to the local police department. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. The empire of lies was completely, irreversibly burned to the ground. There was no going back, and for the first time in my life I felt truly free. By the end of that chaotic week, the dust had finally begun to settle, leaving a radically altered, incredibly quiet landscape in its wake. My parents, entirely stripped of their social standing, their flying monkeys, and their financial leverage, finally realized they had absolutely no cards left to play. On Thursday morning, I received an overnight envelope at my office via certified mail. Inside was the spare set of keys to the Porsche Macan, along with a furious, illegible note from my father. I didn't even read it. I threw the note in the trash. I immediately called a private towing company, had them pick the car up directly from their driveway in broad daylight while the neighbors watched, and had it delivered to a luxury dealership, where I sold it for a very substantial cash return. The mental image of my father having to stand on his front porch, watching his beloved status symbol being dragged away on a flatbed truck, brought me a level of profound, quiet satisfaction that I cannot even begin to describe. But amidst the chaos, the legal maneuvering, and the burning of bridges, something incredibly unexpected and deeply healing happened. I was sitting in my apartment on a quiet Friday evening, nursing a glass of bourbon, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was just another angry, distant relative trying to guilt-trip me, but something in my gut told me to pick it up. "Hello, Harrison," a deep, gravelly voice said. Took me a moment to place the tone. It was my Uncle Victor. Victor was my father's older brother, a quiet, stoic, hard-working man who rarely attended the extravagant family gatherings and always kept strictly to himself. "Uncle Victor?" I asked, sitting up slightly on edge. "If you are calling to yell at me about the Facebook post or tell me to apologize to Dad, I am calling to tell you that you did the exact right thing, son," he interrupted firmly, his voice surprisingly gentle and full of resolve. "I saw your post. I saw the deed. I saw the bank statements. I saw everything." I was completely stunned into silence. "I have watched Richard and Sylvia treat you like a second-class citizen since you were a little boy," Victor continued, a heavy, profound sadness echoing in his tone. "I watched them throw all their money, all their praise, and all their attention at Julian, and leave you to fend for yourself. I always knew it was wrong, Harrison, but I kept my mouth shut to keep the peace in the family. That was my cowardice. That was my mistake. But I want you to know, we have all known about your parents' manipulation for years. No one had the guts to say it out loud. You have family out here who actually cares about you, Harrison. I am incredibly proud of you for finally standing up to them." Hearing those specific words, hearing an elder in my family validate my reality, strictly confirm my sanity, and express genuine, unconditional pride in me, broke a massive, invisible dam inside my chest. For the first time since this entire, exhaustive nightmare began, I actually cried. I sat alone on my couch, pressing the phone hard to my ear, and let the tears freely fall. I had always been told by my mother that family was supposed to have your back. But until that exact moment, I didn't realize just how much support I actually had from people who truly mattered, outside the toxic, suffocating bubble my parents had so carefully created. 6 months have passed since the great explosion that leveled my family dynamic. The transformation in my day-to-day life has been nothing short of miraculous. I worked very closely with my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, to establish ironclad, legally binding boundaries. My parents quickly realized they could not afford the fair market rent for the sprawling suburban house on their fixed income. They were forced to pack up their belongings, downsize their entire lives, and move into a much smaller, significantly less glamorous two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. I immediately sold the house, taking the massive equity I had earned and boldly reinvesting it into my own retirement portfolio. As for Julian, without my money to quietly launder his debts, his entire house of cards collapsed in spectacular fashion. His aggressive creditors came calling, his ex-wife found out about his illicit gambling through the grapevine, and he is currently fighting a brutal, losing custody battle while living in a cheap motel. He tried to call me once. I didn't even let it go to voicemail. I, on the other hand, am currently sitting on the private balcony of a beautiful, quiet eco-resort in Costa Rica. I am here entirely alone, and it is without a doubt the most peaceful, restorative vacation of my entire life. There is no one aggressively demanding I upgrade their room. There is no one charging $1,000 bottles of wine to my open tab. There is no one calling me a cash cow behind my back. There is just me, the warm ocean breeze, a cup of incredible coffee, and a profound, unshakable sense of freedom. I used to think that cutting off my family would leave me completely empty, that I would be an orphan wandering the world without a tether. But I realized through this agonizing process that cutting off dead, rotting branches is the absolute only way to allow the tree to actually grow and thrive. I am no longer a cash cow. I am a man who knows his profound worth, respects his own strict boundaries, and absolutely refuses to apologize for his hard-earned success. Sometimes, the absolute greatest, most profound act of self-love you can ever execute is walking away from the people who share your blood and walking directly toward the people who respect your soul. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, uncompromising line with people who were ruthlessly taking advantage of your success and your kindness? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Thank you for listening.